What's going on, everybody? Aggro here. I'm going to be giving you a quick video, just kind of recap what happened in the SCL during the summer split to kind of get you up to speed on the teams that did make it to Valencia and what they need to work on, at least in my opinion, in order to get to the lands in the fall split, and the teams that are going to Valencia and how they got there and the names that you should be familiar with and things like that. So let's start in Europe because this is the easier region to break down. It has been all rival for about a year plus at this stage. They are at the top of the standings. You can see they get finished with 9 points. Didn't drop a game, just like they didn't drop a game in the the spring split in season 4. I don't know if they dropped one in the fall in Europe in season 3, but I'm not sure if they did. Wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. They've been dominant for a long time. They just haven't quite gotten over the hump in terms of beating those NA teams. But with the roster on the right-hand side of your screen, we're going to start at the bottom. We're going to kind of work our way up. We're going to do that for both regions. Naventic. So this is a team that kind of came out of nowhere to qualify from relegations into the SCL. I think their name was Joust Mains during relegations. A lot of guys that no one had really heard of before, at least that I had talked to on the NA side of things. Aribiax is a guy that has a very odd god pool. He played a lot of healers, a lot of Hell, a lot of Aphrodite, and seems pretty comfortable on those gods, but there's a reason that those gods aren't meta, and when teams are banning those away against you, it does open up your pick potential and what you can kind of draft and make an incredibly overpowered draft, because they had to ban away these off-meta picks, but we never saw Naventic really take advantage of that. I'd like to see this roster kind of get together and figure out some strategies in terms of their picks and bans. It just seems a little bit all over the place, and that's what you're used to seeing from these teams that just qualify out of the Challenger Cup into the SCL or SPL, is that, you know, their mechanics are good, they work together well as a team, but their strategies aren't coherent, and that takes a little bit of time. There's their first split in the SCL. I'm excited to see what this roster can do in the fall. So moving on to Era Eternity, these are some guys that have been around the scene for a while. You might recognize the name Mango Man, Malloy's in the jungle. Sir Duckbot was the guy for me that really stood out. I mean, he was new to the SCL this split, his rookie split, and he had some incredible performances in that mid lane. And if we're being honest with each other, mid in Europe is not a particularly strong role across the board. That is a spot where you can be a difference maker and really set your team apart from other teams if you've got a very strong mid laner, because really for me, Rival's the only one that's had a strong mid laner, and that was Watson moving over from solo, being dominant there, and just using his natural skill to kind of translate to mid. He's done well there. I'm not convinced that he's as good as he was in solo still, but I think that just speaks to how shallow the EU mid pool has been historically. And Sir Duckbot has a chance to be one of the premier mid laners in Europe. Excited to see what this guy can do. This is a team that has some potential. We saw in the last week they played up against Enix, and they did. Both teams looked very good at times. Excited to see what this roster can put together, but keep an eye on Sir Duckbot in particular. Enix is the next roster. This is definitely the second best team in Europe, and in my mind, it isn't close. 50 meter flies, a mid laner, has been around for a while, and again, like I said, the mid pool in Europe is incredibly shallow. He's a guy that's got, in my mind, has got to step up his game. Osric has been hit or miss since he first came into the SCL. He either carries a game or can really become invisible. Dinosaw is a guy during Season 3 under the Cyclone GG tag that really started to impress a lot of people, myself included. Really aggressive support, really thrived in that Erlong Shen style of support role where you could just play aggressive, set up for your team, but also kind of just solo people on your own if you could find someone who's relatively low health. Welsh Beast made one of the best individual plays that we saw all year long so far, winning a 3v1 almost, killing 2 and almost killing the 3rd before he fell. This is a roster that has a lot of potential. In the final week, Predators looked like he was trying to do it all on his own. In my mind, I'm very biased. Like everyone knows, I trash talk a lot of mid laners because I used to play mid, but it's just the role that I feel the most in tune with. And 50 meter fly has not done it for me so far in that mid role. He's got to step up his game, as does Osric. I think the side lanes are very strong on this roster. It's just, can they find that mid jungle synergy to kind of bring them up and over the top? And if I'm Enix, I am trying to practice Rival exclusively, and they are going to get stomped for a long time doing that realistically. But That's how you get better. I mean, this team just has to learn how to be better than Rival, and the only way you can do that is by beating the only team that can beat Rival, and that's themselves. Rival only loses games in Europe these days if they beat themselves, and they haven't done it in all of Season 4 quite yet. So if I'm anyone in EU, it doesn't just go for Enix. If I'm literally anybody in this region, I want to practice against Rival as much as possible to try and understand what makes them so good and how to beat them. Because right now, if there's a limited number of EU teams coming to these lands, Valencia, only one EU team, 3 NA teams, you can write Rival in pen until proven otherwise. And these teams, they've got nothing to lose, in my mind. I would just sign up to get spanked for a while and then try and learn from that. Enix, definitely the second best team in this region. Excited to see if they can kind of close that gap between them and Rival. Because honestly, like, let's be real, if one team's been winning every regional game for the last year, where's the fun in that? I want some parity, hoping that Enix can kind of be the ones to overtake the champs. Speaking of the champs, here they are. This roster is strong. They did have 2 changes coming into to Season 4, though not all at once. Zenborn was their support in Season 3. He was replaced by Jacob HL. Not a big loss there in my mind. Zenborn really strong, but Jacob has proven to be just as good of a support. Dobson is the newest member of this team. Atonement, their previous hunter, leaves due to what I'm assuming is personality differences. The EU SCL just loves to talk to each other on Twitter and put a lot of banter in because, they're European, and I suppose that's what they do. It's pretty crazy to see a team that hasn't lost in their region in about a year change a roster. But I guess personalities dictated that. Dobson has looked pretty good, but Atonement's proven that he can do it on LAN, at least to some degree. Can Dobson match up to the North American Hunters, who are pretty deep right now? We'll have to wait and see. When it comes to Rival, just look at that mid jungle. Watson, Rapio. Watson was the best player in Europe, uncontested in the solo lane, joined Rival as this super team sort of conglomeration, and it's clearly worked out for them. Rapio right now, probably the best player in Europe in the console scene. But on LAN, he just hasn't done it for me. He's had good games, yes. He's also had games where it seems to me from the outside looking in that nerves get the better of him. I feel like this team feels a lot of pressure because they have done so well during online play in their region and that have consistently fallen short at LAN. I feel like they put a lot of pressure on themselves to perform at LAN, and then that makes that problem a little bit worse. We saw that they did end up winning some games previously, but not a set up against North America. Can they do it this time around? I mean, maybe because it's on European soil, Rival's just going to wipe everyone. They clearly beat everyone who they play on that side of the pond, so maybe this is their land to take. I'm going to have to see it from Rapio and Watson, as well as the fact it's not only during the in-game gameplay, but their strategies seem to change whenever they feel that pressure, because they pulled out some compositions. I believe it was Season 3 in the fall finals, when Rapio and Rival, with their backs up against the wall, go Bakasura jungle. And it's something they had been practicing consistently in scrims from what I hear, but it did not end up working out. I don't know. I just feel like this is a team that has the mechanical skill to beat North American teams. It is all mental, in my mind. It is completely mental. At least it was with the old roster. Maybe we see that Dobson and Jacob HL cannot compete with the NA side in terms of mechanics. That's just a wait-and-see sort of situation. This is a team that their biggest obstacle for international wins is themselves. They've got to get over the hump mentally and just feel that confidence, but on the other side, I mean, I say that, but you see their tweets, you see the things they're saying right before LAN. Oh, this is the LAN. We're better than everyone else. It isn't going to be close. And then every LAN, they get destroyed by NA. I don't know what to tell you guys. This is a team, I don't know. I don't know what their deal is. I think it's mental. We'll have to wait and see if they can do it for Dreamhack Valencia, but you can basically punch their tickets to the fall LAN for SCL coming out of Europe, because they're going to beat everyone there anyways. So even if they're not having success on these international stages, at least they're getting the free flights, right? Could be worse. All right, hold on real quick. Got to switch over to the NA side of things. You're going to lose me for a moment, and we're back. Okay, so North America. This region was incredibly close during the summer split. The spring split, it was Astral Authority up top, and then everyone else, like kind of just down the list, doing their best they could. This time around, it was incredibly close. You see, Astral Authority actually secures the 3rd seed coming in because of the tiebreaker up against Soar in the final week. It came down to the final week. Obey was the only team that was clinched. They had a poor performance in the 5th week to almost lose the 1st seed. They somehow come away with it, but there is some question marks regarding that team. There's question marks regarding every team in North American SCL, but they all look good. It's not like they're all bad, and then there's question marks about how good they can they be. You see the ceilings that these teams have, and it's very impressive to watch. The level of play is better than it's ever been in the North American console scene, but there's also these shortcomings that these teams have, and how well can they overcome those. I think the team that makes the least mistakes is going to win Dreamhack Valencia, not necessarily the team that plays out of their minds, because they all have the potential to do that. We'll just have to wait and see. But we'll get to the top 3 in a moment. We got to get through the bottom 3 first. Starboys, this roster. Clow was the newest addition to this team, and they looked like a completely different squad whenever he joined. It was very clear to me that Starboys just needed a cohesive voice to fall behind, and Clow, while bringing a lot to a team, definitely that is one of those things. He can be that primary shot caller for you. He usually, in my mind, needs someone to call him off of the crazy stuff that he likes to do sometimes, like, you know, the crazy Gold Fury calls, the Fire Giant calls. If you look at when he had the most success, it was on that Team Allegiance / Most Wanted roster of Season 3. And I think Matt Coy's filled that role really, really well. Who's going to do it on this team? It's tough to say. Joey Donut is someone who just is there for me. I mean, he has some good performances. He's got some good picks that you can't let him have. I don't like seeing him on the Robin if I'm against him, things like that. But at the end of the day, I think that jungle in North America, there's a very clear difference between the top and the bottom, and Joey has not elevated his name to the top of that list quite yet. In my mind, the player, if you look at this team and you say, okay, if I'm going to stop watching the SCL and then come back in Season 5 and see who's who's moved up the rankings from this roster, Daily Dale is the one for me who I think has that kind of potential. Daily Dale has been a guy who's been around that Challenger Cup scene for a while now, has always been right on the cusp, and he looks like a top-tier support in the console league. I've played a little bit of friendly with him. His communication seems okay. This guy's mechanics are solid. His god pool is expanded. I'm really excited to see what Dale can do in the SCL because his play often impresses me. Cameron, you know, you see him on Twitter all the time. He's one to talk a lot of stuff there. This is a team that has a lot of personality, a lot of ego, I would say. But they've got to find the victories to kind of back that up. 3 splits on the in the summer, no 2-0 victories. You got to find those 2-0s if you want to get towards the top of the standings. You can't just be splitting all the time like this next team, Strictly Business, did the entire time. I mean, this is a team, you look at their record, they only got 2-0 once, but they split 4 times, and so they're completely out of it. Now, this team underwent an entire overhaul multiple times. I mean, this is a team that finished second during the spring split, and who's still on this roster from that team? Only Reminisce and Niquid. The Hunter, Guardian, and Mid have been a rotating door. These guys cannot seem to just decide on who they want on their team and what kind of style they want to play. But this roster is scary. These 3 that they brought on, Reminisce for me was a guy who he came with Elevate to LAN during Season 3, and I was like, what is this guy doing here? He was poor. I mean, he did not have a good performance. He did not look like an SCL level jungler to me. Season 4, he looks like a completely different player. Is starting to rise up those ranks and be one of the more terrifying junglers that you have to go against in the SCL. There's a young kid. He's got to try and find that balance between, you know, the confidence and the kind of overall demeanor that a lot of these younger players have, where they feel like they don't have a lot to learn. At least publicly, that's the way it seems. I've never had a conversation with him, so I can't speak to how he is in that team environment. But you have to understand that even if you're very talented mechanically, you have to have that humbleness in you to be taught by not only your own teammates but your other players. And this is a roster. Matt Coy's addition to this roster is the best thing that they could have possibly done for themselves. Matt Coy's is one of the guys who's been around the console scene for a long time. He's a dude that can have fun, be that joking guy in the team environment, but also has been there, done that, and can really be a mentor to this young team. Nikwin in that solo lane has been a guy that we've been talking about quite a bit on the caster desk in terms of new solo laners on the rise, and he shows that at times. But him and Reminisce's willingness to consistently change out players is concerning to me. There's a team that, with this kind of roster, can be very successful, but I would also not be surprised if they don't get off to a great start in the fall split. It'll just fall apart. You know what I mean? This team will just break up because clearly the answer to adversity for Reminisce and Nikwin thus far have been to kick people off their team, and that's not the way that you succeed. You look at Rival on the EU PC side of things. That's a team that was at the bottom of the standings for the entirety of Season 3, basically stuck it together, and now they're one of the stronger teams in Europe. Obviously, you can't just pick 5 players and say, okay, we're with these guys for life. We're going to get to the top, because you can see ceilings for players, and yes, roster changes are necessary at times. But this many roster changes in such a short amount of time seriously concerns me for the mentality that these two have. But their play is certainly top of the SCL potential. And Baronic and Michael Checo's been a guy who everyone has said, top of the Hunter class, Michael Checo's there, undisputed. And I see glimpses of it, but I haven't seen it consistently yet. There's a guy with a ton of talent, and I think he does have that humble nature and that willingness to learn from conversations with him during the spring LAN, but he's got to be a little bit more consistent. He likes to pull out these weird pocket picks. We saw the Ao Kwang ADC. We hear all about the Hell ADC. Honestly, dude, I just want to see him frag on her. Like, I just want to see him do his job on the characters that get the job done. And if Ao Kwang is that character for him, sure, but expand. It sounds weird to say expand the god pool to a guy that clearly can play everything, but you want to expand the strength of that god pool, not necessarily the quantity. It's about quality, not quantity, and he's got a little bit too much quantity and not enough quality in my mind. But again, for that duo lane, Matt Coy's is a guy who can certainly help him out in that regard. He's been in the duo lane with multiple good hunters. He's got the mentality. His communication is phenomenal. Matt Coy's is a guy that I would want on my team if I were playing. This is a good pickup for them. And then Baronic's a guy who I think has shown flashes of being right there in terms of best mids in North America. Mid as a whole in the SCL, I already talked about how shallow that pool is in Europe. In NA, it is kind of the same way. Mid seems to be the hardest position to find a consistent performing member in, and Baronic has shown that he can be that building block, because when you've got so few options in a role, finding a good player in that role and then building a team around them is a logical conclusion for me. And Baronic has shown that he can be that kind of guy, but he's also shown a lot of inconsistency as of late. And I don't know if that was a product of the team environment it elevated, as it seemed to deteriorate with Checo, Baronic, and Delny leaving. I'm assuming that it wasn't the best of situations there. So maybe it was kind of a situation that caused that drop in play for me. But Baronic is a guy that I think that you can ban out right now. He can play the Hebo, he can play the Ra, he can play the Zeus. Anything outside of that, I'm not really worried about. Maybe I'm forgetting one or two, but if you've got 3 gods that you could play at a very high level, and I'm playing against that guy, I'm going to ban away 2 and then pick to destroy the one that we know he's going to go for. And I think that's what teams are going to start to do against this roster. Baronic's a guy that I have a lot of faith in to try and do that, because he works incredibly hard. I've seen his improvement. I'm excited to see if he can continue to improve, but he's kind of plateaued for a little bit. And I'm hoping that this kind of disappointing summer split will be the rejuvenation that he needs to kind of propel himself back to the top of North American mids. On the side of Elevate, this is also a team that changed a lot as of late. Again, as I mentioned, Baronic, Michael Checo, and Delny all ended up leaving that roster. So then it was Kenshin and Dr. L kind of left to pick up the pieces. And honestly, they did a great job towards the end of the split. They found a split up against Obey, I believe, to finish off, or no, they 2-0'd Obey. Yeah, because Obey doesn't even have a split. They 2-0'd Obey in the final week to keep their dreams alive for Dreamhack Valencia. It ended up not working out because of Soar's performance, but Kenshin's a dude that can just make people around him better. That's very clear to me. I don't think that his play style and his kind of style of being a team player is the right fit for everyone. But Kenshin is a guy that if you find the right 4 players to surround him with, can have a ton of success. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's got good communication in that Guardian role. He's got good confidence in himself. He's a little bit older than a lot of the SCL players, so he has a lot more maturity in that stage. Certainly a guy that has the potential to be on the top of the SCL, but I think that Kenshin's not a guy that you can plug and play with any roster. He's got to be the one to dictate the way he wants it. He clearly likes to be in that control-oriented nature, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a little bit harder to find the right roster for a player like that, but when it happens, and and the sky's the limit. So maybe this is the one. Griffin Slays is a dude that I hadn't really heard of, to be honest with you guys, before being picked up by Elevate. And for me, he seems to be the weakest link of these 5. And I don't mean that in a rude way. I just mean that in an objective manner. We saw him up against Obey, and he was just sitting under tower, farming it out, waiting until late game. And while, yeah, on paper, that's what you want your hunter to do, if that's your only play style, it can be difficult to find success when teams know that you're going to play that way. You can play really late game oriented gods. Hell, I'd pick X-Ball against this guy. I'd pick Freya, Chronos, whatever, and just farm it out to late game because I know I'm not going to be under pressure from him in lane. So he's going to have to step up his game if this is going to be the Elevate roster going into fall, if they want to compete to go to Worlds. Mr. Teep is a dude that, again, I know I harp on mid laners, especially on console, all the time, but you got to understand that's where I come from. Mr. Teep is a guy who has not impressed me in that mid lane yet. Excuse me, my dog is going crazy about something. Mr. Teep is just a dude who just hasn't done it for me quite yet in that mid lane. He had a good performance up against Obey on the Chang'e, but Chang'e is not a pick that I'm really ever scared of in that mid lane. He's got to expand that god pool. He's got a lot of things I think he needs to work on. But Kenshin's a dude who's been around the block long enough, who can teach him how to be a good mid laner. Clearly, I don't think it's a coincidence that Baronic improved greatly when on a team with Kenshin. And if Kenshin can do the same for Teep, then we could see some good success there. Dr. L is a guy who moved from solo to mid to jungle. He was all over the place during Season 4. Clearly has found a home in the jungle. I used to question the god pool there. I don't anymore. The best Morgan on console, I don't think it's even close. This dude can really pull it out. Does seem to be pretty momentum based. If he doesn't get a lead, then he doesn't seem to play with the same amount of confidence, and hasn't in my mind recognized the small areas when behind to kind of catch back up quickly with a big play. But when ahead, he could push it better than just about anybody. Certainly one of the best junglers in the SCL. I don't think you can really question that any longer. Neximus, again, a guy that is kind of new to the scene. Kenshin picking up these rookies like he seems to like to do. A dude with potential that, nothing really stood out to me necessarily, except for that Ymir obviously up against Obey, where it was really Dr. L and Neximus running the show on the right-hand side of the map, but he's only done it on one god. That's not a knock against him. I only saw him play one set. He played Ymir both times and dominated both times, so not his fault. Excited to see if he can do it on more than just the Ymir in the solo lane. That brings us to Astral Authority. Kind of a surprise third place finish here from this team. And I'm gonna talk pretty candidly about them because I'm close with Brochacho, a former teammate of mine, one of the best friends I have in the scene, and I've known Transonics and Wolves for quite some time as well. Competed against them for the entirety of Season 3 and a little bit before that. This is a team that in my mind, from the outside looking in, again, and I think that it's difficult to make these kind of statements, and then the players usually come out and say, that's not the case, and then we end up looking like idiots, the ones who are saying these things. But from just my perspective, I think this team got very complacent after their dominant spring split. I think that they lost a lot of the drive and fire to be the best, because they were the best, and they were. I mean, it wasn't close. Maybe this kind of performance and getting third seed here is what they needed in order to get back to that level of play. I certainly hope so, because this is a team that is incredibly fun to watch. Transonics can play a bunch of stuff out of that hunter role. Wolves can play literally anything, but he'll still pick Odin. Chaotic Purpose is a guy that I think a lot of people had question marks about at LAN. I certainly did, going into the spring finals LAN. He absolutely killed it. Can Brochacho keep his head level going into the summer finals at Dreamhack Valencia? We'll have to wait and see. He's a young kid. He's never traveled outside the country before, at least to my knowledge. Will that get him out of his comfort zone? Potentially. Chaotic Purpose is the machine that moves this team along. Brochacho is the engineer that keeps that machine running well. For my money, Brochacho, and again, completely biased, I'm going to come right out and admit this, Brochacho is the support that I would pick 100% of the time because of his in-game attitude, because of his willingness to improve, his willingness to lose and learn from it, and just his overall confidence at the same time. Great team atmosphere guy. Literally couldn't ask for a better team atmosphere guy, but does have the potential to be too unselfish with his farm. He has carry potential. He can carry out of that support role, but at times puts himself behind intentionally to get guys like Covey and Chaotic Purpose ahead. Would like to see him play a little bit more selfish, because I think that given the farm, he can make the game-changing plays by himself. He doesn't need to give up that potential for the other side. And then Covey in the mid lane, like I said, mid lane pool has been historically very shallow in the console scene. Covey came in and really made a big splash and looked like he had taken over Delta Marine's spot as the best mid on console. He did, in my mind, during the spring split. He looked like the best mid. His performance at LAN was disgustingly good. I mean, it was really, really impressive what that kid did during the spring finals LAN. In the summer, he has looked not only worse, but objectively not good enough to play on this team. Bad, in my mind. And that's very harsh words, I understand, but it's only because we've seen his ceiling. And I don't know what was going on with him during the summer split, but if Astral Authority is to win Dreamhack Valencia, it's going to be because Covey and Chaotic Purpose are playing at a very high level. And I didn't see that from Covey during the online phases. Maybe being at LAN, being around the team, being in that environment is what's going to elevate his game back to where it was during the spring finals. And I hope so, because he's a ton of fun to watch whenever he's playing well in that mid lane. But he had a lot of poor performances during the summer split. And he's a guy, him and Chaotic Purpose, again, who I'm looking at to see if they can step it up during Dreamhack Valencia. That brings us to Soar. And Soar is a team that I don't know how they continually surprise me, but they do. This is a team that you always look at and be like, yeah, that's a good team. But are they the best team? Probably not. Now, they might be the best team right now, at least with the way that they're playing. They looked phenomenal in the final week. They went up against Astral Authority and 2-0'd them and looked really, really good doing it. Kaden, for me, is the scariest jungler to go up against in the SCL right now, just because of the way he's playing at this particular moment. He gets into it at LAN. There's a scary dude to go up against. Don't let him get the Susano. That's the one that he seems to be the most comfortable on. That is a guy that I would permanent ban away from Soar. I gotta take a moment to gush about my guy Zaxi. So Zaxi, again, I'm biased, I'll admit it. Former teammate of mine, loved his attitude, but we told him this then, just wasn't there quite yet in terms of game knowledge and mechanics in order to be a top ADC. Now, he's fixed both of those issues. I have been incredibly impressed with the way Zaxy's been playing out of that duo lane. One of the best hunters in North America right now. I don't think there's any question about it. His god pool's gotten bigger. His positioning's gotten better. His understanding of the matchups have gotten better. And he's just been hitting more stuff. And so when you check all those boxes, you're looking at a really, really strong hunter for Soar. Love what he's been able to do. In particular, with Medieval Doc in that duo lane. Medieval has come over from the PC side of things here in Season 4 and really transformed the way this roster has looked. Another great attitude guy who wants to win and is willing to learn to do so. Not, overly confident or anything like that. Confident in his abilities, but not overly so. Love the way this guy plays the game. Has that kind of odd god pool. Will play the Xing Chen, will play the Sylvanas gods that you're not seeing other supports really pick up consistently. But he is, without a doubt in my mind, one of the best supports on console. Love the way this kid plays the game. Stormy Rays is a guy in that solo lane who, you want to talk about someone with confidence, Stormy Rays is the one with it. I think he's that edge that Sword kind of needs. Him and Kaden are those dudes who are going to stand up and yell at you during the LAN. Those are those guys. They are both very, very strong in that regard in terms of confidence and in terms of their gameplay. They certainly earn a lot of the trash talk they give. I do think Stormy can fall into these pitfalls where he thinks he's better than he is and kind of hinders his own progress. But with guys like Zaxi and Medieval on the team to kind of keep that atmosphere light and keep it focused on learning, there's a guy that certainly learned a lot from his time with Brochacho and Chapo on Soar during Season 3. They obviously moved on. Stormy's still here, and he's doing really, really good things in that solo lane. He can play overconfident, though. He can be caught out of position. He can be that guy who is diving in 1v4 on Osiris because he feels like he can. And a lot of times, to be honest, he can, and it works out. And, you know, we're sitting here with our feet in our mouth saying, oh, what is Stormy doing? Oh, Stormy's killing everyone. But he's got to be worried about that going into this lane. And then there's Shaliber on the other side in the mid lane. One of those mid laners who's been around for a while now. And it took him a little bit to get his God pool going, but he has it right now. And that's one of those things that it just took him a little bit to get there. But now that he has a solidified God pool of a little bit of that weird stuff that he likes, a little bit of, you know, the Chunga, the Hell, the Zhang Kui, that kind of stuff. But you can also put him on the meta picks. You can also put him on the Thoth, on the Raw, things like that. And that's what he really needed. He needed in the Scylla, excuse me. That's what Ra was like. I think he could play it, but Scylla and Thoth are his two meta picks that he picks fairly consistently. And that's what Shaliber needed in his God pool, was multiple consistent meta picks. And now that he has it, I expect to see him be a lot more consistent. I think it's a guy that can get into his own head and needs someone to kind of rally him and get him ready and confident. And when you've got Caden and Stormy with you, then that could be pretty easy, as well as Zaxi and Medieval. I mean, he's surrounded by guys with great attitudes and confident attitudes that can really propel him and get him ready to go. He has impressed me with his play as of late. Very hot and cold player. When he's hot, he's one of the best mids in the game. When he's cold, he can make it very difficult to win. But when Caden is playing at the level that he is right now, having a jungler that does crazy things for you can make a mid laner look real good, real easy. Trust me, I had a jungler that was really good and made me look good, and I had to do very little because of how good my jungler was doing. This can be the situation for Soar. I really do think that there's a decent chance that Soar wins this LAN. I think they are that good right now. Do not be surprised if they come out of Dreamhack Valencia on top. And then you've got Obey Alliance, the defending world champions. This is a team that you never know what you're going to get from this team. And I think that they're understanding that they can be losing horribly in game one of a set and come back and stomp you the next few, something that really works well for them. That's what you get from being LAN veterans. I mean, DeWorst has been to almost every LAN, as has Jelly, since the very beginning of console. They might have been at every single LAN, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think they have. I think they've been to literally every LAN. I can't imagine one that they would have missed. These are guys that have been around the scene for so long. I love the way Jelly plays support. Aggressive, maybe overly so at times, but you know that he's invested in everything that in every game that he plays in. Delta Marine, for my money, is still the best console mid in the game. Right now, I don't think it's that close coming right now. But again, I've said Covey can look like he's right there with him. Boronic looked like he was starting to close that gap. Maybe even Shaliber at times. So Delta Marine for me still consistently the best mid on console. Mifflin is the X factor here for me. Mifflin is the definition of a momentum-based guy. He is the type of dude that I would want on my team at LAN. Just always, you know, he not only will gas himself up, you know, he'll not only get himself hyped up with his plays, but he'll get you hyped up for your plays. And I think that's something that not a lot of these players will do. You know, when someone like, you know, Caden makes a sick play on his own, he'll let you know about it. You know, he'll get up, he'll yell at you, all this kind of stuff. Mifflin, if DeWorst destroys you, Mifflin's going to be yelling at you for DeWorst. And DeWorst is going to be yelling at you at the same time. And I think that his style of energy is so important in a LAN setting like this. These dudes are veteran, unfazed, not worried about them in terms of, you know, they didn't have a strong end of the split. I'm not worried about it. They talk about all the time, coming into the Worlds last year, they were getting stomped by that Soar roster for months in preparation. And then they meet that Soar roster in the finals and embarrass them, basically. So I'm not worried about this roster whatsoever, except for how well can Manser do on LAN. Manser, the new addition to this roster with Eric Kruger stepping down, that longtime hunter. Manser, for me, for whatever reason, I honestly could not tell you why Manser has received so much heat about being in the SCL. You know, does he deserve to be there, especially on the defending world champions? He gets all this stuff. I don't get it. I mean, the kid clearly is willing to learn, and yeah, he's not the top hunter in North America right now, and I don't think that he would tell you that he is, but clearly has the right attitude, and this is what happens. I mean, you get it put in a situation where you have an opportunity to learn. These guys on Obey, they don't pick someone up just because. They clearly have a lot of faith in him. He does have to play a little bit better. He does need to take leads and then run with them, because Obey has done a good job of giving him leads in that dual lane. He hasn't been able to translate those particularly well into the mid to late game team fight stages. And the teams who are going up against Obey, I can almost guarantee you, are going to be looking to shut down Manser or DeWurst. Those have been the two that you seem to have success in, because the 3v3 for Obey is just not going to get beat. Jelly, Mifflin, Delta Marine, I wouldn't want to fight those three either. You want to look towards the side lanes, DeWurst and Manser. How well can they hold their own? DeWurst, obviously a LAN veteran, looked a little bit shaky towards the end of the online phases, but on LAN, I wouldn't have any worries about him. This is Manser's first time playing on LAN in Smite, so how well can he do in that sort of environment? But again, if I've got a guy like Mifflin on my team who's gassing me up, who's getting ready, who's yelling at the opposition for me when I make big plays, that gets me hyped up, that gets me in the game. This is a team that can absolutely come out and have a big performance at Dreamhack Valencia. So those are the teams in the SCL for the summer split. Hopefully this got you guys kind of caught up to speed on all the teams. If I had to make a prediction, I honestly think Soar might be the ones to take this one, but I have a hard time rooting against Astral or Obey. I will never pick Rival to win a LAN until they win a LAN. You know what I mean? Until they actually do it, because they're just so far in their own heads right now that they have to prove it to me, and I think to themselves, that they can have that kind of success that they've had online during the actual in-person tournaments. That does it for the summer split. Hopefully you guys will catch those games in Valencia. I know I'm really excited to watch them, and we'll see you there. Thanks for watching.